Well, all right. It's been a while since we've done a live press row hangout. Welcome, everybody, to our official Hit the Pass Madden NFL 16 Initial Impressions show. I'm Rich Grisham, joined by my good friend Brian Weedeye. Mr. Weedeye, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, and judging by this being a live show, I guarantee my dogs will freak out at some point during the show and totally interrupt us.
And my cat will jump on my shoulder as well. So these are things that happen. We just have to deal with them, I suppose.
They're highlights. People feel they're highlights, Rich.
That's true. That's true. All right. So we are here, as I said, to talk about Madden NFL 16 initial impressions. This is not a review show. We will have our official press row podcast review roundtable with all of the expected characters. But Brian and I have both been playing Madden NFL 16 since it went live on EA Access. Thank goodness for EA Access yesterday. So we got a lot of good stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about gameplay. We're going to talk about the intro. We're going to talk about draft champions. We're going to talk about online play. We're going to talk about we're not going to talk about our head-to-head match. If anybody would possibly want to watch that, you can go check that out on Hit the Pass.
Yes, it's 45 minutes of pure joy. Pure joy, Rich.
And just for the record, I do know who Jimmy Graham was. It took me like 3 seconds. I'm like, oh, yeah, he's the best tight end in the NFL. I get it. I mean, relax, everybody. It's okay.
Yeah, people were on you for your general NFL knowledge, I believe, right?
Yeah, well, again, like I said before, I'm a big NFL fan starting on Week 1, Game 1. I don't pay attention during the offseason, hardly. I don't pay attention during the preseason. I watch the games. And by the way, in the NFL, great players come and go faster than any other sport. So, today's LaDainian Tomlinson is tomorrow's, LaShawn McCoy, and then, the next year it's somebody else. These guys come and go quickly. So every year that goes by, I sort of get a little less and less interested in the day-to-day machinations of the roster. But that, Mr. Weedeye, is not why we're here. All right, so let's start off with gameplay. A lot of people talking about a bunch of different stuff, but with me and Madden, as we've talked about, to me, by far the most important thing, more than presentation, more than new modes, more than anything, is just how does the game play on the field? So, Brian, you and I both played quite a bit. You played more than me, but we have some good discussions around this. So just give me your initial take on, what's happening on the field. Do you like it? What are you noticing? What perhaps are you also noticing positively, negatively? Give me your initial take on that.
Yeah, so going into Madden 16, there were a number of things that coming out of 15 were frustrations, and certainly we hope to be addressed. The biggest one, and it's been this way for years, has been the lack of interaction between wide receivers and cornerbacks, and that even when you had single coverage with a receiver like Calvin Johnson, you couldn't really take advantage of that. You couldn't just chuck it up to him like Matt Stafford does, because there's a good chance the ball is going to end up in the hands of a defender as Calvin Johnson stands there looking befuddled. So they've definitely taken care of that issue. Now, we still have to evaluate the extent of which the balance goes between the offense and the defense. So far, in my experience, it's been pretty balanced. It's been a good combination of wide receivers with high spectacular catch ratings, pulling in a pass, plus pass breakups, which really you didn't see in the past. You would see the ball hit one of the receiver's hands, square in their hands, and somebody would drop it if it was going to be incomplete. But there's a lot of really natural looking animations where defenders will slap at the ball will come out. It might fly into the air for an interception. Rich, you had one of those on me where you jarred it out and another defender came over and snatched the ball out of the air. And then there are times where a defender will go up and get it. There's so many factors in play here that it's going to take a while to really know how well that balances out in the long run, whether people are going to find exploits or find a way to take advantage of it in certain ways. But between the defenders having a chance at the ball, the receivers having an equal chance at the ball, or depending on ratings, one of the two would have an advantage. But deep ball accuracy is so crucial. The first games I played were as the Raiders in a franchise mode, and I was trying to take advantage of Amari Cooper, and I was throwing deep, and Derek Carr, he has terrible deep accuracy, and I was off the mark by about 10 yards on most of the passes. Great to see. I was excited about that because, again, that's another incompletion. What the issues with Madden really, as far as the passing game, have been that the ball doesn't hit the ground. It always hits someone in the hands. Now we're seeing natural-looking breakups, natural-looking incompletions, inaccurate passes. We do see these spectacular catches, though, and those tend to stick in your head. So I think it's natural to think that that's happening too often. But in my experience so far, it hasn't. I need to play more online to see how that goes. But otherwise, a lot of positives to gameplay.
Let me stop you here real quick. I want to talk a little bit about the wide receiver defensive back interaction. Now, we have been hearing about this for quite some time. We even heard rumblings last year, when Madden came out, that Madden 15 was not the year where the cornerback wide receiver interactions would really would be a focus. We've heard from the community about this a lot. I would say that even if I had not known that there was the focus on the receiver D-back interaction, I would have noticed it, right? To me, this is not something where it's, oh, well, they mentioned it and, oh, yeah, I can see it. Like, it's very apparent that, there's a lot more sort of battling between the two, not on every play, but in some plays, you definitely see more sort of jockeying for position between the two players than you would have seen before. So it's definitely something that is noticeable. What I find interesting, and there's a few areas of this. There's even more happening during a play now than ever, right? It's sort of in the past, generally speaking, unless you were one of the the very sort of elite players, you have to figure out what you're doing, before the snap. You call your audibles or your hot routes, and then once you snap the ball, you sort of take it, and if you're passing, you look around, you find your receiver, and then you throw the pass. You'll either hold it for a bullet or sort of, hold it a little less for a lob, and then the receiver will make the play or not make the play. Now, after you hold the pass, and there's even more passing options, which we'll talk about, now you have the option to also make a certain type of catch or not. So, there's just more and more happening. You don't get that break at all now. I mean, you don't have to choose, if you're a receiver, to try to make an aggressive catch or try to, do the run after catch. You don't have to, if you're a defensive back, elect to play the ball or go for the man. But just the fact that it's there and these icons are sort of flashing at you, sort of prompting you to do it, it's like, boy, there's just even more to do now on every play in the game. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just interesting that, more and more sort of little things are piled on just, during every play. So, I find that to be an interesting decision to make.
It's a lot of that you mentioned is natural to me because for years I've been clicking off and controlling wide receivers. Now I'm not someone who has done the rocket boosting in the past and gone to those lengths, but I like to take control of the receiver and try to get in position. And I think that's especially beneficial this year because positioning is factoring in here too. If you can get how you body up a defender, for example, in going for a ball, it's going to make a difference. I mean, there were a couple throws I made into the end zone, close to the end zone, and Jimmy Graham, I believe, and just in getting between defenders or getting in front of them, it's crucial because if you're not in the right position, they're going to have a better play on the ball. And I think it's just the results are driving what we're doing on the field. Or if that might not even make any sense. But what I'm trying to say is what we're doing on the field is leading to realistic results. And that's a really positive thing to see for me anyways, because it was so frustrating. We can go back and into our email threads from the Madden franchise we were in, and it was always, man, my guy dropped this pass or this stupid defensive back. I mean, I had him wide open, single coverage, and this defensive and the ball, drops in underthrown, and the receiver just stands there, and the defensive back gets it, or the defensive back just drops it. It was so many memorable moments for negative reasons that leave you kind of feeling sour about your experience. Now, I might drop a pass. I might break up a pass, but I can live with those things because I feel like they were a realistic outcome rather than just a deficiency of the game.
So you mentioned a little bit about the accuracy. I want to talk about that a little bit more. I've played, I don't know, a half dozen games now, and I've played as a couple different teams of, not only the Eagles, but also as my draft champions team. And I'm definitely noticing the ball is flying all over the field much more than it used to. I don't know that I like it. I like to think that an NFL quarterback who's got his feet planted on the ground is a little bit more accurate than I'm seeing.
You've played with the wrong quarterbacks then, Rich.
Well, even my draft champions quarterback was Aaron Rodgers, and even a couple of times his throws went a little haywire. Not as much as Sam Bradford, for crying out loud. The guy, like, according to Madden, can't hit the side of a barn. So,
well, keep in mind also in draft champions, like Aaron Rodgers is not 99 Aaron Rodgers unless you had a special one or something. But he's like, I think I had him in one draft and he was 91. So they're not necessarily representative of the skills we know them to have now or are in the base roster of the game. So there's probably some inaccuracy there. But even the best deep thrower, I don't remember if it's Rodgers or not, it might be Breeze, is just a 79 in deep throw accuracy. And what that means, really, who knows? 79 might be last year's 100. We don't really know until we test it out.
Yeah.
But they've definitely tuned that so that you're not just dropping the ball into the receiver's hands every time. You've really got to set it up and make a nice throw.
And I understand why accuracy feels tuned down, because a lot of throws were completed in the last couple of years. We've talked about quite a bit the completion percentages of quarterbacks is very high. Now, in the real NFL, completion percentages of quarterbacks are higher these days than it ever used to be too. So, it's an interesting challenge that the team has. I'm not sure I like where they ended up, at least so far, with, the current tuning set. I think it feels a little bit pushed in the more inaccurate, for no reason kind of randomness. But, again, my sample size is not significant. I want to be clear, right? It's a half dozen games so far. So, but it's definitely noticeable. Like, no doubt that it is very noticeable that the quarterback accuracy is different in Madden 16 than in last year. The tackling, though, but before we get on to the next thing, tackling, there's some more cool tackling, right? I see more interesting, realistic looking collisions between players, and several times there have been broken tackles that I have never seen before, both running and with receivers after getting the ball, which I find interesting and sometimes frustrating when I'm on defense and I got two guys bringing down a wide receiver and somehow he breaks away from the two. It happens. It never really used to happen, but it does happen in the real NFL. And on the plus side, when I got my running back and he breaks a couple of tackles that in the past he wouldn't have. So, and even just in the animations, like, there's some interesting times when if a linebacker gets leverage, he'll lift, the running back off the ground a little bit. So some cool stuff there that I've noticed as well that I found interesting. Any other sort of gameplay hits that you got?
A few, and while we're on the subject of tackling, just mention that the gang tackles definitely look a lot better this year. Definitely seem to have more of an influence on the result of the play, like you were saying, as far as running backs breaking tackles. If you bring that extra guy in to take a runner down, you might need that guy there. He might be needed for support. So that's important, and guys will still pursue that runner even after one guy has engaged with them. So I think that's important. Hit stick to me seems toned down significantly.
I agree.
Which disappointed me, because one thing I always in our franchise, I always consider myself one of the better tacklers. I always often prevented the big play that some other people did. I'm not the most dynamic offensive player in our leagues. But on defense, I was usually able to contain big plays, and a lot of it was because I felt steady with my tackling. And that was with about 90% of the time I tackled with the hit stick. I'm just not feeling the impact of it anymore.
Well, I can tell you, I can tell you that a few times. And again, my sample size is not significant. Not like I've spent, 20 hours with the game, but several times I went for a tackle with the hit stick and I whiffed, which turned into a long game. I mean, I can count of 3 different games where I did that. So I'm definitely wary of using the hit stick again, at least right now. And what's very difficult to tell in the early days of a game is, are these fundamental changes to the game, or are these just adjustments to tuning that, 30 days from now, 60 days from now will be very different. There's so much subtlety and variables and all this, going to be a little tough to tell.
Yeah. And so I'm still using it. It's still fine to use. You're just not getting the thud on the hits that we typically had gotten. Go back to the run game for a second. This is usual for me. I think every year with Madden, the first couple days, my run game is behind my pass game. And then I end up passing by the pass game later on as I get more comfortable with controlling a player. But the run game to me has been a little tough, especially up the middle. I have not had very much success. And the CPU has not had much success against me. Like you mentioned, small sample size. But this is also an issue in Madden over the years, is the CPU has struggles to run. So I think anytime my first game involves the CPU running 6 carries for 4 yards or something, that triggers in my head that, here it is again. I don't know if that's the case. I have to continue playing more. I've played, I think, about 12 hours now. I'm on my second run of EA Access on a second profile. So I'm just going to be playing more in the next couple days to establish that baseline for the review and see if some of these early impressions are confirmed.
It's interesting. In Madden 25, running outside was very powerful.
Yeah, I know, because that's all you did, Rich, in our league.
Well, you didn't need to add that part in there. In Madden 15, running inside was very powerful, at least, again, with the type of offensive line that I built. This year, again, I'm having some success running inside, at least when I'm using the Eagles. I can usually run those inside, I forget, like inside zones and off tackles, and I can usually gain 5, 6, 7. A couple times I've broken 10 or 12. But there's more times than last year where I will get hit at the line of scrimmage as well. So it doesn't feel like it's a wild shift, but it definitely feels as if the tuning is, and I'm so used to running inside, I haven't run outside a lot. I sort of have to unlearn some habits from last year's game and sort of figure out what's going to work. And again, as we said on the stream last night too, because like the team that I play the most with, the Eagles, are so different, right? Not only is their quarterback different and the running back different and their receivers different, but even their guards and center are different too. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge. Our good friend Pete Dodd is asking us a question, Mr. Ludi, so I'm going to read that live on the air. He says, this year focuses on passing and wide receiver defensive back interactions, but my biggest problem with Madden 15 was that you couldn't break a long run. Has this been fixed? My answer to him was yes, in at least a few circumstances. And he said, no, don't text me back. Answer it on the stream, you jerk. So I'm going to let you answer that question.
Okay, so the teams I've been playing with are not necessarily break a big run type of teams. If I'm the Seahawks, Lynch will do that sometimes. Beast quake runs, but in Madden, typically you're looking to gain just chunks of yardage with Lynch and not necessarily break one. If I was the Chiefs and had Jamal Charles or the Steelers and had there's any number of guys that have that explosiveness, and we looked at speed ratings, acceleration ratings are kind of wonky this year. I don't know. It's hard to judge that at this point. I did have one run with was it Alfred Blue? And I think it was against you, Rich, when we were just testing out an online game where I got to the outside, and I think it was probably about 30 yards. But no, I haven't busted a run. I did return a kick for a touchdown, which has been rare for me over the years. So that was kind of fun. And so it's just a matter of, I'm not sure what the issue might have been in the past. Was it getting in the open field and getting run down, or was it just not being able to get into space? I'm not sure, but I have not had that many opportunities so far to break a big run.
Yeah, the big runs haven't been ones that I have broken, but have definitely been broken against me. Like in the first game of my Eagles franchise, the Falcons running back, second or third play from scrimmage, ripped off like a 58-yard run for a touchdown. And then in my second game of the year, the running back tore off like a 75-yard run. Granted, I wasn't the guy doing it, but I don't recall a whole lot of those kind of runs last year against me versus the CPU as well. Oh, by the way, Pete also says you look very handsome with your glasses, Brian, just so I want to let you know. Next thing I want to talk about is...
We can take comments like that all the time.
Next thing I want to talk about is penalties. I am not trolling. I am not being a contrarian. Brian Weed, in my first franchise game of the year, 3 penalties, 3 holding penalties.
That's it?
2 of them wiped out first downs, and then on third down, and then I had to punt. And the third one would have, but I fumbled on the play, so they declined the penalty. Not fun, Brian. Not fun.
What are you talking about?
3
Rich.
holding penalties, including 2 against Jason Peters, an all-pro left tackle. Are you kidding me? Bad. Very bad.
Okay. Adversity, Rich. Teams in the NFL face it in every game, right? You have to overcome. You can't always have 2nd and 3, Rich. Sometimes you need to have a 1st and 20. This is an issue we've had for years, and there's your cat making an appearance.
There's the cat. Yep.
Yeah. Right on time for penalty talk. So when you tend to get violent and upset,
that's right.
And you take that out on us by throwing at us in MLB The Show. By the way, if anybody doesn't know this, anytime you hit a home run off a Rich, he intentionally beams you afterwards. And if his pitcher needs to get taken out, if he needs to replace him, he just figures, I'll just get him tossed.
Yep,
so,
absolutely. Works
so
every time.
He has this anger in him, and penalties bring it out again. But no, I think it's really interesting because it does present you with different challenges. Now, you might have a point there if it's Peters holding all the time. Depends on what defensive end was going up against him, I suppose. If it was J.J. Watt, could understand that if it's a top-tier defensive end. If it's just a mediocre defensive end, you've got a good point there. From what I've seen so far, though, the penalties have been, 2 to 3 a game. Seems all right to me. The penalty slider works. I turned it up to 99, and penalties were getting thrown all over the place. And there, even more than the number of penalties, I think it's the variety that intrigues me the most about this, which is, occasional defensive holding, which gives the other team a first down, or a pass interference, because these are things we see in the NFL every game, multiple times. But in Madden, you never had to face those challenges. It was always just march up and down the field methodically. You didn't have to face this adversity that every team has to, and I think that's an important part of the authenticity of this game, is adding those things in and making you face unique situations and say, okay, I went into the replay and looked, and yeah, he did hold him. Now, maybe he shouldn't have hold him. Maybe he didn't need to hold him, but he did it. At least the refs are recognizing that. And I mentioned this on the stream too, or on our game we played, and I had a interception wiped out by a defensive holding on the other side of the field. Okay, I was okay with that. I thought it was kind of cool. Now, if that happened in every game, if I lost an interception because of that, I'm going to get annoyed. But it's a challenge. We came back and we held him to a field goal instead, and I feel like that's a win after that. So I like it, Rich. I like the penalties as long as they're not overdone, and if they have a purpose and aren't completely random. Now, holding is a tougher one for me to justify because there is an element of randomness to it. But if they had implemented it properly, and I can't say that if they have or haven't yet, but I'm leaning that they have, it'd be primarily ratings driven. And then are you running movement plays with your offensive line? Are your offensive linemen pulling? Are they slow? Are they unathletic? Are they poor run blockers? Do they have poor impact block ratings? All these things can come into play here. Are you running sweeps? Are you reverses with your wide receiver? Are you reversing field with a running back? Are you scrambling around with a quarterback? There's so many different variables involved that could affect whether a player does something that's against the rules. So I like it so far, though, Rich. I do, and I don't feel like it's overdone. The only problem is, and I don't know if we want to get into bugs yet. Do we want to get into bugs yet? Because there's
not yet, but we will. We definitely will.
So I like it, Rich. It's a big thumbs up for me. It's one of the best things about Madden this year is the penalty. I'm not kidding.
I know. That's why I'm laughing, because, again, I recognize with all of the interactions I've had with people, everyone tells me I'm wrong. Everyone says you want more penalties. It's more realistic, more realistic.
In an offline franchise, or you can do an online franchise with yourself or with a couple people or whatever, you can turn those penalty sliders down.
Oh, I understand.
And I know it's going to affect us because in our league, I'm going to jack it up to 90 or something, Rich, just to irritate you, just like I'm going to go for 2-point conversions on you all the time. Doesn't matter. It's going to be fun. But and you're going to have to face the fact that you have to deal with all this. But
clearly,
the option is there, and there's not going to be the option for online play. Now, I've had people note to me, and I don't want to get into online too much, but because we'll get to it later, but I've had people note to me that they haven't seen penalties online, with exception of the encroachment type of penalty where it's something you did theoretically, because again, the bug.
By the way, I'm fine. If you get me to jump off sides and I manually jump off sides, I'm fine. That's not the kind of penalty I'm talking about either.
Right, but that's the only penalty we would ever see in the game before, and that's the difference of this year.
I'm fine with that, but okay, we've had this conversation before. We will have it again. I want to talk to you a little bit about the passing mechanics, right? So this year there are some additional passing mechanics. You can still pass the same way you always have, right? You can just hold it down longer for a bullet, or you can lob it. But now you have the ability to do the purposefully high throw using the left bumper and the icon, or the purposefully low throw, as well as sort of the double tap touch pass. Are you using those controls? And if so, what has your experience been like with those?
I have not. And because I feel like I have that same control over my passes. You saw me. I was dropping passes over the top. I was throwing bullet passes. I wasn't using the bumpers to change those passes. I was just pushing forward on the left stick to get the loft on the ball, or pushing the button down hard to get the bullet pass. I mean, that's just years of playing that way. And until the prologue, which points out, throw a fade to Antonio Brown using the left bumper and his button. Until that, it hadn't even really come to mind at all, because I throw fades without that. So I don't know if that does influence it differently, but I don't really see a need to use it at this point, because I'm getting the type of passes that I want already.
Yeah. It's interesting. Again, I completely understand where they're coming from with adding these, because some players want more control, right?
Yeah.
And I've been experimenting with them. I'm trying to use them, like on a curl route, I'm trying to sort of throw lower. I did a couple of times in my most recent games, the two that I played right before the show. I started using the high pass, and a couple of times it was successful. And one of the times using the high pass also turned into one of the the one-handed spectacular catches. So that sort of seems to be a correlation there. I don't know that I'll be using them a lot, but I understand the point, and I am sure that there will be a group of people that will really use those. a lot. It'll be, it's another one of those layers. Like just there's more that you can do every play as you're, as you're playing Madden. And it'll be, I just wonder if not using those ultimately puts you at a disadvantage because of the improved AI, or if it's just one of those things where, if you use it, great. It'll give you a little bit more control, a little bit more feel like you're over the action versus, if you don't, you're still not going to get punished. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that yet. To me, it just seems like something that's easier to explain to a novice, which is push this button when you throw to get a lofted pass, as opposed to, set your feet and then step up in the pocket and hit the button more lightly and push forward at the same time to get the same result. I think it's just easier to explain and probably bring people on board with the idea of becoming a little more advanced in the controls.
So I want to talk about, in the franchise mode, the drive goals.
Oh,
not a fan. Not a fan.
This is one of the worst things about the game this year.
Now, see, again, I'm not going to say that, right? Because, again, to me, this feels like something that can easily be ignored if you're not interested in it. But it also is something that if you do want to really sort of min-max your guys, you can you can use it if you want. My sort of concern with it is that it doesn't really, sometimes it doesn't make sense. For example, there have been multiple times where I was supposed to target a certain receiver 3 times in a drive. That's not anything that a coach would ever be trying to accomplish in an NFL game. In an NFL game, you're trying to either score or chew the clock or, set the tempo. But no one's ever said, all right, no matter what, guys, we got to hit Miles Austin 3 times on this drive.
There were probably days when they said, get the ball to Terrell Owens or else he's going to blow up on the sideline. That's probably one of the few examples.
So, and another example is, well, on this drive, you have to get a passing touchdown. Well, when I'm down 7 points in the third quarter,
I don't care how I get a touchdown.
I could care less. Yeah. Could care less how I how I score. Other times it's sort of interesting. Like they wanted me, the quarterback, to get 3 completions in a drive to sort of get into a rhythm. Like I can understand that, especially like with the Chip Kelly coach team. You want to get your quarterback in the rhythm. You don't want to have a 3 and out. You want to get moving. But I guess my sort of biggest gripe with these things is that they kind of interfere with what I'm trying to do. Sort of in my head, I have the game plan for what I'm trying to accomplish. They somewhere between a distraction and an annoyance. But again, I understand that as you're in a franchise and you want to build your players' attributes, these are opportunities to do it. It doesn't feel like it works in the context of the actual game and what you're trying to do, which is win the game.
No, I completely agree. And like you said, some of the stuff is silly and obvious. Like, get a sack with this guy. Well, to increase his XP and confidence. Well, I'm sure I'd love to get a sack with him, but I'm more worried. I don't care who gets the sack. I don't want to get a stop. Right now, there are probably people out there who do this already because they jack up. We've seen it in our leagues, Rich, where guys get 80 sacks in a season, and so that their progression goes up or run for 4,000 yards. But there are also some. This is my even bigger issue with it. There are some that are going to influence people in negative ways in how to play beyond just the force the ball to this guy type of thing.
It's something that I mentioned when this first came out a few months ago when we were talking about it.
Yeah. So I think that influencing kind of a poor behavior, game behavior.
Yes.
But there's also ones that I think are that are just trying to mess with your strategy. There was one I saw that said, blitz 3 times on this drive or blitz 3 times in a row. It was something like that. I just glanced by it as it did, and I was like, wait a second. Situationally, I might not want to blitz here. Why are you telling me to blitz? And I think it's almost like suggesting someone does something, and there's no guarantee that's going to work, and it might be the wrong thing to do at a given time.
Yeah,
there's just stuff like that which irritated me. And beyond that, it's just distracting, first of all.
Yes,
and it's huge And if certain camera angles, I mentioned again last night that certain camera angles, if you're in the defensive camera angle where you're locked into one guy, and let's say you're a linebacker or a safety, that box that has a drive goal on it covers up the quarterback. You can't see the quarterback at all, which to me it's a little off-putting because I'm usually watching the quarterback for when the snap comes. And so the whole thing irritated me. Now we should mention, apparently, and I haven't tried it yet because I wanted to leave all this stuff up for people to watch.
You can turn it off. Yes, they're like, you can turn this off if you want to.
That's one of the banners, right? That's one of the banners that shows up. Right. Hey, you can go in and turn this off in the visual feedback. Now, I have been told, I have not verified this yet, but someone told me that you go in and turn it off, try to turn it off in your franchise, but it's not saving as turned off, so you have to turn it off every time you go into a game, which would be utterly frustrating again for just a whole nother reason.
Yeah.
So,
and there's also, sorry to interrupt, but there's also just strange things that will happen. For example, I had on one of my drives, my drive goal was to not get sacked. Well, on the fourth play of the drive, I fumbled and the other team got the ball. And then I got, congratulations, you achieved your drive goal. I'm like, no, I did not achieve my drive goal by fumbling the ball when I'm already down by a touchdown. But,
so you achieve your drive goal if you throw an interception instead?
Now, again, I understand, right? It's sort of the game within the game. Like you can have some modicum of success even if you have something that in the greater context of the game doesn't work. It just, again, it doesn't feel like it's working for me with how it's set up. It feels like it either use some adjustments or just not at all. But on the other hand, I will say I do like the little ticker at the bottom that tells me certain goals. Like, for example, DeMarco Murray trying to get 100 yards. I can see where he is, how close he is to 100 yards, because there is value in getting to some of the goals, the game goals of your players, and that had always been hidden away. So again, I'm not saying it's something amazing, but I don't dislike knowing sort of how close my my individual players are to getting the goals for the game.
I dislike it because the ticker could be used for something better, like scores around the league and news and stuff that you actually see in real life. But the one other thing I wanted to mention, Rich, is that we're talking about the banners and stuff. What do you think about that little XP that flashes up above players when they've earned XP?
Well, I kind of like it because that is if you ever play a game like that, if you ever play those kinds of games, RPGs or things like that, those are, tenets of that. So,
sure.
It's very familiar, and it there's just a little bit of accomplishment. Like, it's hard not to feel good by seeing that little thing pop up. On the other hand, in the context of an NFL game, it feels out of place and kind of strange.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling on that as I do with the drive goals and the banners and all the pop-ups that crowd the screen. And again, this is not when you're going for a game that's supposedly representing what you see on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, Saturdays sometimes. This is stuff that's just, it screams video game, right? It screams this is a video game. And when people praise games like the show or NBA 2K, it's because, wow, that looks like what I see on TV.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
Madden is even not just because of the camera angle, which will inherently, that will always seem video gamey when it's not in a broadcast presentation camera. But it just shows kind of a different approach that either the development team takes or decision makers are taking as far as representing the sport on the field. And so when I was playing Madden so far, my thoughts were, I like mostly what I'm seeing on the field, except that when I was playing my franchise mode games, I was annoyed half the time with stuff. So, and that's where most of the time is spent, at least for me.
That's right. For me too. And for, the people that we interact with the most regarding Madden, we're all in the same, online league. So yes, that's absolutely right. whereas that's not popping up in just our regular online head-to-head games or something like that. Yeah. So, people who play, Ultimate Team will be like, "What the heck are these guys even talking about?" I don't see that.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ultimate Team, let's talk about Draft Champions. It's a new mode. It's an interesting bridge between a franchise or online season and Ultimate Team. I've played a little bit of it. You played a little bit. Again, give me your initial impressions of Draft Champions.
Okay, so basically, you're fed into this string of games you're going to play. You can choose against the CPU, or you can choose against other people online. And that's where the draft process begins. You're presented with 15 rounds of drafting. Each round, you get a choice between 3 players. And now, the thing that works the best about this is that the random nature of who you're going to see popping up, but still having a influence over what players you have on your team. And then there's interesting strategy in that what positions are you choosing for, right? Do they match up with the coach you chose? Because you get bonus for fitting into their system, essentially, as a type of player. And then what's going to come later? Because you don't know. Do you want to grab that 84 Matt Ryan right now? Because later you might get, in the first draft I did, I took some quarterback who was in low to mid 80s. And then the last round came around and Randall Cunningham was one of the options. And so I'm like, well, now I would have wasted a pick if I take another quarterback here. So there's strategy involved in not just filling out your team and where you want your strengths to be, but when do you take certain players and all that. So I found that interesting. And because you get to repeat that process over and over, that's fun because you're going to get a variety. Now, I don't think this is going to hold very long for people who just play offline, because it's against the computer. It's going to get old. What this is, though, is potentially a very strong online mode, because you're going to get the variety you don't see in standard online games. Mm-hmm. You're playing against teams with different people on it every time, different players that you're used to seeing, but they're not overpowered. This isn't like a Diamond Dynasty in the show where everybody's lineup top to bottom is 99s. Mm-hmm. Everybody in this mode is going to have 15 players who are basically 80 plus, and then the rest are all low 70s or below. So everybody's going to have areas of strength. Everyone's going to have areas of weaknesses, and it's going to be a very balanced experience, and the variety you're going to get there is exciting. I've only played the one online game, which I won with a pretty cool touchdown in the final minute. And that's where I think the appeal is going to lie in playing online against people and getting those different experiences. So I'm positive on Draft Champions. We'll have to see if this is still something I'd be playing in a month or so. I think because it's just against random people online, for people who do just play random people online, it's better than going on to just normal head-to-head and facing the Seahawks and the Patriots and the Packers and the Cowboys every game. So, but here you're going to get good variety. You're going to see different types of teams, different players, different legends, but you're never going to feel like there's some unfair advantage on one side or the other. And that's what I like about it, as opposed to the Ultimate Teams, the My Teams, and the Diamond Dynasties of the world.
I think they're on to something with Draft Champions. I'm not sure that in its current new incarnation that it is the right recipe for long-term play, but they're on to something. It's fun to pick your team, right? It's fun. It's quick. It takes a couple of minutes, and like you say, interesting choices. But you don't have to really obsess over picking them, right? Because ultimately, if you like your team, you go take a few swings at beating some players, and if you don't like your team, you're like, I'll just not, right? I mean, they're definitely onto something. I think there will be a group of people who wind up playing a lot of this mode because of the things that you mentioned. And I think it'll be an interesting challenge to see if there will be a high conversion or if it will just be one of those, modes in its current state where, it's sort of popular with a small niche group, or if it does gain wider appeal. I don't know. But I definitely think they're onto something. I think it's an interesting first try, and I've played some and I've liked it, and I'm going to play some more to kind of keep going. Let's talk now about the opening. There's been quite a bit of talk now. It's all over YouTube. So if anybody has not seen or doesn't want to know about the opening, it's not really a tutorial. It's an opening experience. There's some aspects of teaching you about the game, but it's really meant to be a more interactive story. So if spoiler alert, I suppose. Give me your initial thoughts on the cinematic opening of Madden, which builds on last year, and is a another interesting attempt to try to position a bit of differentiation.
Yeah, right. So we had the Seahawks-Panthers ones last year. This year it's Steelers-Cardinals, and there was also one in Rory McIlroy PGA Tour. So this is clearly something that EA sees value in, not just giving you kind of a different experience to kick off the game, kind of a positive impression immediatting off the bat, rather than some dry tutorial or walkthrough type of thing. But it's letting people kind of get into the experience right away. Now, I think there are definitely some really compelling elements to this. One of the downsides is it really accents what's lacking in the rest of the game, because they really accentuate these emotional moments and the heights that they reach and the lows that they can feel. And we don't see that in the rest of the game. Now, that's not my big takeaway from this, Rich. That's not my big takeaway from this.
Yeah, let me just say, I'll let you get right back to it. Let me just say, I don't want to play this or something like it all the time. Like I kind of I would like the ability, to have a separate experience as opposed to sort of be on a path of where every single game I got all this interaction going on. But anyway, keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. So they force you, first of all, they force you to do this. You can't skip it. You can't pause, although as you pointed out, you can go to the dashboard, which holds it up. But you're stuck in there, and it's, I don't know, what was it, 5 to 10 minutes?
Probably about 10 minutes, I think. Yeah.
So the cinematic scenes for this one, horrible frame rate, which is just really, it almost was unwatchable for me with this frame rate and the cinematic scenes. Now, when you're playing the game, that's not there. Playing the game, it's fine, but the cinematic scenes were really bad.
Unwatchable to me is a strong term, but noticeable and detracting from the experience, definitely.
Yeah. And EA apparently didn't learn from 2K's experience that athletes don't make good voice actors. So, that's kind of, at least it's not as big a part of the experience as it was in my career mode. But, Antonio Brown, not the greatest voice actor, and some of the others not great either. So
true.
Yeah. Let's see. Where was I at here? Okay. So this prologue, it basically walks you through what to do. So it's not really like you're playing it. It tells you press this button, and it's just going to play out for you basically until the last play where you might or might not get it. You're probably going to get it. You didn't, Rich, but we probably know why after you played me online. We probably know
stop
why.
it. Oh, come on. Now, hold on a second, right? I mean, I am not the world's best Madden player, but I am not a bad Madden player. I've won divisions. I've made Super Bowls. I've made title games in our league. I mean, I'm not a complete doofus when it comes to
I know, Rich. I'm just teasing you. It's easy to do in my position right now.
Oh, boy. Guy wins a game, thinks he's the best in the world. My goodness.
Rich, calm down. It's all right. It's all right. You're going to be okay. So I guess the question then becomes, Rich, is this like a start of them moving towards like a story mode, something beyond that?
I don't think so. I mean, well, no, that's dumb to say. Clearly it is. My point is, I don't think it's, I hear and read, comments about how, this and the intro to Rory McIlroy and last year's, this is what sports games are going to be in 5 years. No, I don't think it's that at all. I think, if anything, it allows the medium that big time sports video games is to give you a different kind of experience than you can have watching on television. But I don't think it's something that's going to overtake it. I think, if anything, it will be complementary, like another. Oh, like we've had the conversation, before. Like, I would love the ability to just play a 2 or 3 hour sort of separate, interesting, different way of playing football. I still want to play my franchise, in our online league, the way that we played football for a long time. To me, there's a lot of value in that. But it is fun to sort of get into the game. But to me, to play a season or like a Hard Knocks kind of a thing over the course of a few hours, that's cool. Like, I've talked so much how I like the My Player in NBA 2K, but I've never gotten to the end ever. I've played 3 of them, and I've gotten to year 2, year 3, but I've never gotten to the end because it's so much.
We don't need an open-ended thing like that. I was thinking more along the lines of, I don't know if you played Fight Night Champion, which really the central mode for that game was a story mode, and I think I finished it in under 3 hours.
And I think that's a good thing, by the way. Like, to me, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It's nice to have alternatives that don't need to be all-consuming and take forever to get through.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay. Any other? Oh, yeah. And the evidently the opening has branching storylines or branching things. So if you're like me and you just have trouble completing a fade on the opening, because your son is trying to tackle you as you're playing the game, you can see a couple, 2 or 3 different endings. Yeah. Again, I'm not going to go crazy over it. I think it's interesting. I'd like to talk to Mike Young, who is the creative director of at EA, who I believe is sort of behind some of these things. I'd like to talk to him about what this year's is about and what they're hoping to accomplish over the next couple of years. Hope to have him come on the show in the next couple of episodes to talk about that. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure the execution is 100%. But it certainly is something that I welcome. These kinds of new things and experimentation, I think, are valuable. It's easy to just throw stones at stuff and cast aspersions of it, but when you've got, a year or 10 months to build a game, it's nice to see something different, even if not every aspect of it may be appealing. It's something that I think is worthwhile, no doubt.
I like the concept of it at the very least. And I think it works pretty well for what it's trying to do. At least they're telling you, here's the left bumper and the hit the B button, just like we were talking about earlier. That's the first time, it clicked with me that, okay, there's that other way to throw the ball now, even though I choose not to use it. So they're trying to bring people on without it being intimidating. And I think that's a good way to do it, because if and this is a discussion we have all the time, someone who hasn't been playing Madden for a decade picks up the game, they're never going to be able to pick. It's just so overwhelming. All of these sports games are so overwhelming on the right off the bat. So this kind of thing, I think, gets people in a little more comfortably.
No, it's true, and I'm thinking about this as I mentioned, like they're layering more and more on top of it. When you layer in now I can, throw low or throw high purposely with left bumpers and stuff or hit the run after catch button. But when I hit the run after catch button, if I hold the run after catch button down, then I dive. Like, oh no, you only got to hold it for a second. And then all of this extra stuff, that's not sort of, it's not instinctive, for lack of a better word, for those of us that have played, this game for a long time. It's interesting. And again, I'm not saying I don't want it. It's, the more options you have, the more potential control you give to people, the better. But it's at a certain point in time, there's going to be too much. And I'm not saying there's too much here, but for some people, it's definitely too much. It was too much before. And for others, they look at this stuff and they welcome it. How has your online experience been so far?
So I played only 2 games or maybe 3 now. And in one of them, the game would freeze up for a couple seconds, and that was every 10 to 15 seconds. And you know what I'm talking about. It just pauses and holds and then goes back to normal, and then it'll pause and hold again. I was streaming at that point, so that could have been factoring into it, but there was an email from a friend of our show who was having the same issue. So I don't know if that's widespread or not. I can't speak obviously on anything being widespread after just a couple games. Our game, Rich, was consistent, but there was noticeable input lag, and it caused things like getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands to become a difficult endeavor on certain occasions. And but otherwise, Madden's always been pretty good online. It's always been pretty good online. I don't know if I would say it was spectacular online, but it's usually not an area of the game that I worry about coming through. I think it will be okay. And one change that has been pointed out to me, because I didn't notice it, I haven't done just a normal ranked game, is that you no longer see the opponent you're facing. So you pick a team, you don't know who your opponent has taken. And I guess that's because what would happen is people would choose, they'd go into the team select screen, they'd see their opponent take the Seahawks, and then they'd back out. Like, I'm not facing them. I'm out of here. That's a pretty good chance I'm going to lose. The problem is with this, you don't know what your opponent is picking, so you have to default to one of the top teams. So now I go in, and I don't know who my opponent is going to choose. I just have to presume they're taking the Seahawks or the Patriots or the Packers or the Cowboys, just one of those teams. And so now I have to take the Seahawks, Patriots, Packers, or Cowboys. So that's one of the biggest issues with hiding the team. Now, it does eliminate that backing out of a game, but do you really want to get into a game with someone who would have quit on you anyway? Like, they're probably just going to quit in 5 minutes instead. So also, I don't think you can change your uniforms online, which is odd. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But yeah, that's the extent of online at this point. One draft champions game and 2 online games for me so far.
Okay. Last couple things. Any really cool moments? I mean, anything happen where you said, "Oh, that's cool," or "Oh, I never saw that before"?
Yeah, well, we have one of those in. I think I mentioned it earlier when my receiver, it was 3rd and 18 or something. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to chuck it downfield, and aggressive catch with Doug Baldwin, and your defensive back fought for it, knocked it out, and another defensive back came over and took it out of the air. So that was cool. We've had a number of really cool animations. Diving or going up for the ball just looks really natural. And then the last minute win I had in my draft champions game online, which I posted the GIF of on my Twitter, and just looked really good in the open field. Now, as I rewatched the replay, clearly my opponent was clicking onto his defenders and reacting to things poorly. But just the way that I caught the pass with Julio Jones, catch and run, he got it like the 50 and then weaved around. Just the way he weaved around and the way he moved looked really cool to me. So those are the standouts at this point. And I have a reel for the video review I'll be putting together. I have a reel of about 11 catches already and 10 incompletions or something that just look really cool. So I'm going to be rolling those out. So those dynamic moments, though, are really the key to what keeps me interested in Madden. When the worst Maddens were the ones where you knew what was going to happen before the ball was even snapped. You knew what the limitations were. You knew what the likelihoods were. I think what you have now is this feeling that, okay, just about anything can happen, which makes it exciting and makes you have to focus and play more realistically. And so that's where I'm at with that. Now, are we going to get to bugs, Rich, or do you have?
Yep, we're going to that next. But
you have any moments, Rich, you need to throw out there?
Well, not moments so much as, because I'm still, I'm a little surprised at how uncomfortable I feel with the game, not with the user interface, right? Not with the play selection. I'm just, because, and it has a lot to do with the fact that most of the game, well, actually, I've been unfamiliar with my team in all of the games, whether I'm playing with the Eagles, who, as I mentioned, have new everybody basically, or whether I'm playing with draft champions teams who, are literally put together at the moment. No matter what, I'm not quite comfortable yet with the game as far as making the right throws and finding the holes in the offensive line.
It's understandable, Rich. You gave up a Hail Mary at the end of the first half to me, so it's understandable you're not comfortable with anything at this point.
Well, what's interesting to me is how the more little things that Madden starts to get better at, such as better tackling or a little bit smarter player movement, or better defensive AI or better offensive reactions, the bigger the things they haven't gotten to this year stand out from a negative perspective. Like the guy who, when he gets tackled, won't move. He'll just lay prone on the field until everybody else gets away from him. Then he hops up. You know what I mean?
Sad. It's really sad how they just abandon guys on the field. And when they're injured. When they're injured too. And they're just laying out there and the camera cuts back and you just see them laying out there all by themselves. It's sad.
But, the better that the game gets, the more stark those kinds of things happen, whether it's the guys just, schlepping to the sidelines, like zombies after the end of a play, or how nobody really goes crazy when you score a touchdown with seconds left, or, and so that's what's becoming more apparent. Like this, to me, I think is going to wind up being universally said, because it's the easiest thing to say at the end of every review from a major website, is this is the best Madden yet, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to feel, all things considered, this is the best Madden yet, as it should be, as the third one on the newest consoles, and they've had time to learn all this stuff. And I understand when you've got a game that has this long of a legacy of technology, and you've got a short window every year to attack things, that some things are going to get done and some things aren't. So, but it is interesting how, to me, again, those things, the better some things get, the more they almost highlight how some of the other things stand out. So let's talk about those bugs. You've got a few things you've caught that I think are pretty interesting.
Yeah. So the first has been in the game for years, and this is relatively minor, all things considered. But when you get a turnover and there's a penalty, the ref will indicate the wrong side as the penalty being on. So I mentioned earlier, I had that interception wiped out to a defensive holding. I've breathed a sigh of relief because the ref said holding offense, and he pointed at the other team, and so I was like, oh, okay. And then it cuts to my my players looking distraught, and I'm like, oh no, here we go. So there's that's still in there, and then same with the players' reactions to penalties in general, which stand out more now because we're seeing penalties more. So I had a run called back on a holding. Now it was a long run; it was like maybe 25 yards, or maybe it was a pass. Either way, it was fairly far downfield. Flag goes up, and when you watch an NFL game, the players know what's about to happen. They don't walk down the field to where the line of scrimmage would have been. They hover back. They stay back. But no, I see my offensive players walking down the field, like, no, turn around, guys. So those are just minor annoyances.
Yep.
And then things like the challenge system and calls not being challenged properly in the final 2 minutes, or not having the option to challenge it yourself outside of those 2 minutes. But the big one, and this already got a response from creative director Rex Dixon on Twitter, is that there's this issue with coming out of a huddle, CPU players, whether they're on your team or on the other team, will often, and when I say often, I mean in the context of what we're used to or what should be happening. It's happened, I think, 6 times to me now. I had it recorded 5 times, and I've posted all 5 of those. They will come out of a huddle and just wander into an offensive lineman. Looking back at it, there's one where Brandon Mebane just who knows where he's going. He saw a buffet or something. He's like, I gotta, and then just wanders backs into an offensive lineman. Like, what is going on here? And so in a few of these situations, it's common enough that in one game I had the CPU do that, come out of the huddle and walk into my offensive line twice within 30 seconds of game time.
Which by the way, I don't know if you mentioned it, it gets you called for a penalty, right? So there's, it's not just silly. It'll, get you for encroachment.
No. So like when that happens to the CPU, you might not care because you're like, oh, cool, free 5 yards, whatever. Good job, Tiburon, thanks. I appreciate it. But then in other cases, it happened to me twice on a goal line stand where in one of those plays, it was third and goal from the 2. And so my guy just wanders into the offensive line for no reason. And now it's 3rd and goal at the 1. And that's a significant difference. So we have this issue and it's happening often enough. A ton of people have replied to me on Twitter saying it's happened to them and it screwed them out of a first down or a stop on defense. And so it's definitely a huge problem. And Rex has already said they'll work on getting that patched ASAP. So that doesn't do us any good right now, and it's important. Just because it's going to be patched later doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it right now.
That's right, of course.
So I have to mention that because it's one of the biggest issues right now.
That's why, we always wait for a couple of weeks for the start of our online league for exactly these reasons, right? No matter how good a game may or may not be, in Madden, we learned the hard way. You don't want to start your online league the day it comes out. You want to give them a week or two. You want to let them get a patch out there for all these kinds of things.
Yeah, and there's other minor things like in franchise mode, stat tracking. Like someone mentioned on Twitter to me and showed me a screenshot of dropped passes not recording and things of that nature. So, I mean, there's so much. There's no possible way any of us can go through and find all of these things.
Oh, sure.
But there seems to be. To me, I'm not used to Madden having some of these issues. Usually it's a fairly clean game, a fairly polished game, whether you want to say it's a good game or not. Game was always fairly polished and you didn't end up with some of these things. So that kind of was jarring to me in my first 12 hours.
So before we wrap up, we have one more question from our friend Pete Dodd. He wants to know, Brian, is Madden more fun than Rocket League?
No, I would say that's really difficult because it's so different. Rocket League is such a unique experience and so fresh. It's like nothing we've played before, and everything about it has been positive. Yeah. But any league licensed sports game has the disadvantage of they have to play within the rules. They can't have cars out on the field. You can't have all these fantastical elements to it. You can't customize your players with cool icons and paint colors and it's not all cooperative. It's a completely different game. You can't really compare them, but pure fun. I mean, nothing is beating Rocket League right now.
So far, I'm enjoying Madden. It's definitely got some things that are going to be interesting to see the more that we play them, how they come across. I mean, to me, the next generation has been very good for Madden. Overall, I feel like this is a strong effort from what I've seen so far. I'm happy with it. Definitely things can be adjusted. Sounds like they already are. But I mean, my initial impression overall is pretty darn positive. Brian, is that the same with you, or do you feel a little differently?
I feel similar to the way I feel every year almost with Madden, which is good game, not great game. And I'll enjoy it, not terribly enthused about it. I'll enjoy it because of the way we play in our franchise. Mm-hmm. Without that, would I be playing it for extended periods of time? Not so sure about that. But what I do like about this version opposed to others is, again, some of those frustrations of mine over the years have been addressed. Mm-hmm. Just the dynamic nature of the passing game and the way you can defense that at the same time. Very good. The penalties coming into play, another good step forward in my opinion. And so there's reason to be optimistic, not just about this year, but about kind of the focus of the game, because it's not, we look at. Well, I was just going to say we look at what is Ultimate Team damaging the rest of the product, right? And I'm not saying that it is here. When you look at one of the other sports games and what they announced this week, I think you can make that judgment. But gameplay wise, I think what they've done has been a focus on important things as opposed to fluff. From they were not going to put penalties on the back of the box, but that they paid attention to that kind of thing says they're in the right mindset, at least as far as how they want this game to be. And then outside of that, the modes, I think it becomes more of a debate about their direction with modes, but I'm more pleased with the gameplay than I am with some of the other stuff in the game.
I feel that there is a solid focus. It does feel to me like there is. It feels like there's a vision behind this game, and the vision is being executed. And I will say this, and it's hard to sort of quantify it, but I feel like more than ever, Madden is going to play. You're going to be more successful the better you are at understanding football. It feels to me even more so this year that if I call the right defense for the right kind of play, I'll be successful. If I call the wrong defense for the play, I will not be successful.
Rich, your microphone. It's that time. It's that time of the evening when Rich's microphone craps out on him, and I have to wait for him to unplug and plug it back in. This is the magic of Apple, Rich. This is the magic of Apple, where Rich can't keep his microphone functional for an hour and a half.
So as I was saying, it just feels to me like there is a good consistency to the vision. It feels like ever since the PS4 and Xbox One launch, it's been a solid progress every year without going crazy, without the fight for the fumble or without the vision cone, right? Yeah, there's new stuff and new things all the time, but again, it feels like to me the core football game continues to get better, right? And so overall, I think that's coming through, at least for me. Well, all right, Brian Weedeye, this was a lot of fun. Appreciate it. And as I mentioned, next week we'll have the full review roundtable after Brian and I and several others of the Press Row regulars have gotten our 20-plus hours in and gotten our reviews for the various sites all put together and edited and published. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah. So, Rich, where's your review going to be? My review will be on Sporting News on Monday morning. I will also have an accompanying video review, which I mentioned earlier. I'm going to piece together, as I've only done one or two of those in the past, so I'm going to play around with that. But the main review will be up at Sporting News on Monday morning. Rich?
I will have a review over at Games Radar on Tuesday morning as well. And Brian, independent of Madden, you and I will be doing a whole bunch of stuff for the Sporting News over the course of the next few months, which is very exciting. In addition to our regular daily content and Hit the Pass. So a lot of good stuff happening, my man.
Yeah, I can't complain because, after all, it's video games. But I have not slept much the last few days, and I have not even watched the latest episode of Mr. Robot. I'm trying to avoid any and all spoilers. It's the best show on television, Rich.
Mr. Robot.
Get with the times. Mr. Robot, USA Network, best show on television right now.
I just finished watching season 1 of True Detective last week. I'm a little.
Well, don't watch season 2.
I've been given that advice.
Don't bother with season 2. Watch Mr. Robot.
Mr.
Instead,
Robot.
do it for me.
Okay. All right. Well, on behalf of Brian Weedeye from Pasta Padre and Hit the Pass, I am Rich Grisham from Hit the Pass. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for those of you who are listening on the Press Row podcast. As always, we appreciate it, and we will talk to you again real soon.